1. Hello and welcome to the CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast. I'm Andrew Wade with Case Specific Nutrition. On this channel, we focus on the 3 M's: mindsets, myth busting, and mentoring, all as they pertain to health and nutrition. This podcast is brought to you by Case Specific Meal Prep, our very own meal preparation and delivery service. Fresh meals inspired by dietitians and created by a chef, delivered contactless to your door every Sunday to allow your week to be delicious, nutritious, and ready to go. Check us out at csmpgh.com for more information, and make sure to place your order by this Thursday to get your meals this Sunday. Before we dig in today, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to share today's episode with a friend or a loved one. Make sure you do your part. And when you share this on social media, hashtag spread the health. We're always trying to reach new people and help them navigate their complex world of health and wellness. For more case-specific nutrition content, you can follow us at Case Specific at Case Specific Nutrition on all social media, and at casespecificnutrition.com for resources, blogs, and all of our content and all of our services. On today's episode, I am extremely excited to welcome Scott Thompson. Scott is the COO of Genetic Direction, which is a genetic testing group that does a whole lot of things beyond that simple introduction. But welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I've been really excited for this interview. We actually were supposed to do this a month ago, and Scott's actually down in Texas, and they got hit with some crazy weather and power was out and all that good stuff. So I had to wait another month before we could dive in, but I really do appreciate you taking the time. For those of you that are familiar with Case Specific Nutrition, you probably are aware of the fact that we offer genetic testing, and we do it through Genetic Direction. I've offered Genetic Direction testing for a few years now, and in a little bit, we'll dig into more about why I picked Genetic Direction to start. And then for those of you who are not customers or clients of the Case Specific Nutrition world, we do, amongst our dietitian counseling, our behavioral services, we do lab testing as well as genetic testing as pieces that can help us better build and better identify paths forward for our clientele. And again, Genetic Direction is the group that we've been proudly using for a few years. It's so easy to set up, it's easy to send, and what I love is the data that's given back, the way it's broken down and explained. It's extremely educational, very informative, gives a lot of really good advice along the way, and is something that I've always been very impressed with. So I guess first and foremost, Scott, thank you for basically helping run such an awesome company.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, we obviously saw a need in the industry, and so we started the company about 6 years ago to meet that need.
Yeah, it's definitely a need, and it's continued to be getting it's been getting better and better. And so just a quick background on my side of things. In my master's, I did some nutritional genomics, and I took genetics at the undergraduate and graduate level. And so very introductory understanding of what we're going to be diving into, but I've always been extremely nerdy and interested in it. And I also have always felt that nutrition in the modern day has been kind of like throwing darts at a dartboard. And I always say that I went to college for 7 years through my undergraduate in dietetics, my 1-year residency to become a dietitian, and my 2-year master's to get really good at flicking my wrist and throwing that dart, right? And to me, genetics and nutritional genomics is going to be the equivalent of me being able to walk up and put it in the bullseye. I think that it is the way of the future. I think that in the future, every single client that walks through our door should be getting a genetic test as a way for us to do a more full-bodied and in-tune analysis of them. And I think that it's going to be the gateway to us really truly understanding the difference between this random fad diet's the best, no, this one's the best, and truly bridging the gap of actually, given who you are, this makes sense for you, this makes sense for you. I feel like our dietary world has such cross and contaminated and conflicting information. And that's in part because different people need different things. And I think that genetic testing and the work you're doing is really what's going to prove that and kind of quiet the stupid competitions that have been going on for far too long.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really what we're doing is giving you, the practitioner, a shortcut to the right solution. So,
Yeah.
and before testing and, all kinds of testing, food sensitivity testing, micronutrient blood analysis testing, but specifically genetic testing with us, it's trial and error, right? We're going to try this diet, we're going to remove this, we're going to change things up in this way, and you can do that, right? But it'll take months or maybe even years to figure it out. Whereas now you can test, and with us, again, specifically genetic testing, you can really cut to the chase pretty quickly and help people, give people the right diet and exercise recommendations that are in line with their genetic predisposition.
Exactly. And it's so exciting. And I think, obviously in the world of emerging trends, obviously in these last 10 years, and we'll say even more so in the last 5, we started to see genetic testing come out and people were getting really excited about it. And one of my big concerns was that, especially with anything research related, I mean, there's a timeline of how valid it is and how representative it is, how many people can actually benefit from that information. And I think some of the earliest adopters were getting information that might not have been as valid or valuable to them as they were hoping. I know that there was a lot of extrapolation, and I won't name any of the companies that I think were, the big contributors to that, and they've got plenty of lawsuits to prove my comment. But it's to say that one of the things that I was doing is I went through and I researched about a dozen different genetic testing companies. Not all of them did nutrition, but just different startups, different groups. And one of the things that stood out to me about your group is when you sent over everything, the first thing you sent was the 78 research studies that your initial GX Slim test was based on. And I could look at a trait, fat metabolism, for example, and it would show me the 14 studies that you guys utilized. And I'll never forget, I said this to you before we started, that, I was reading one of the studies or one of the traits, and it even said, this trait has good research behind it in these populations. More research needs to be done in Caucasian men, as an example. And I literally wanted to stand up and applaud in my office, because there's nothing wrong with having information and also knowing that we will have more, but being honest and transparent about that, because I think that it's so valuable to make sure that people know that the information they're getting is actually something they can be doing something with. And so I picked your group because of that. I was really impressed by all of the studies that were done, the level of rigor you guys kept it to, and again, the transparency that you had. And so I wanted to let you know that, and obviously let everybody know sort of where, 4 years ago when I was like, okay, genetics is where things are going. I want to make sure that this is something that our company's staying up with. The idea of being case specific is going to involve genetic awareness. And again, I've never once regretted my decision to work with your group. So thank you again for that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We definitely hang our hat on quality of the research that we use and the quality of our recommendations, and I would say, again, won't name names, but, compared to other companies in the space, we are by far the most conservative. So many times you might see traits in some other tests that maybe you won't see in one of our tests. And that's because the research behind it isn't strong enough for us to really support it and say, okay, we're going to include this in one of our tests. So our medical team, our genetics team, are some of the best minds in the country when it comes to genetics in the space of preventive health. So diet and exercise and lifestyle. And so, these guys, this is their life's work, their reputations, depend on it. And so we're just very conservative in the research that we use. So have very high standards in that area.
It's so meaningful. And like I said, it's for everybody listening. That's one of the things to be very aware of is, and I have clients that ask all the time, they're like, oh, I did this genetic test. What do you think? And, they send it over and I look at some of the traits and they're extreme, they're way out there. And I'm like, and you do a little digging and you find that there's one study and it was a, cross-sectional on a dozen people. And like, you're just looking at it, you're going, this really isn't the point where we could say, yeah, use this information for yourself. So I have a lot of respect for your group prioritizing quality over quantity. And to be fair, just in the time that I've worked with your group, the amount of traits that have been added as your research continues and as genetics continues to exponentially grow in our knowledge and understanding has been absolutely fantastic. So we'll double back to the discussion of, like, what makes a trait ready for the world in a bit. I want to make sure you and I want to make the most of your brain. I've talked enough during this. So I want to make the most of your brain and really start from the beginning, and give people listening a chance to really understand genetics at a base level, and then really what we'll call the genetic landscape, right? Like, what is it doing and where is it going? And so can we would you mind tapping into sort of like a genetics 101 of like what it is and why we should care?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll preface this by saying I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but been in this space, and we have some of the most amazing minds in our group. So what we really looked at when we started the company was the fact that genetic testing has gone from, the human genome was first mapped around 2000, and after it was mapped, I would say it was maybe 4 or 5 years, you could pay. I want to say this was maybe 2007. You could pay to have your full genome sequenced, and it cost $1 million. And Angelina Jolie did that. She had her full genome mapped for $1 million. Well, today, and so that price has just come down astronomically. Obviously, today you can map your full genome, which is 3 billion data points, for under $1,000. Well, when you look at genetic testing and what we're doing, we're only testing the markers that are needed for the tests that we perform. And so right now that's about 300 markers. Well, so what we saw was the opportunity to use genetic testing in ways in a preventive space. And so whereas before you would pay $5,000-$10,000 for a genetic test to find out which cancer drug would be most effective for your particular condition, but now with the cost of genetic testing coming down, you could do it for more kind of prevention reasons. And so what we're doing, or I guess from a genetics 101 standpoint, what has happened with the falling price of genetics is that genetic testing is that there is so much research that has been published in the last 10, 15 years that has basically linked a set of genetic markers. It could be one genetic marker, which we call a SNP, or it could be up to 20 or 30 for a particular trait. And so this research will show a genetic predisposition if you have these certain genetic markers to how your body utilizes fat or how your body responds to strength training, things like that. And so the science has just continued to build and build and build. And so, what we're doing is we're testing certain genetic markers. We take those results, and our scientific team has developed algorithms to say, okay, if you have this combination of genetic markers, then you are likely to experience this. And one thing that's important about genetic testing and results is that, like anything with genetics, a genetic I would say outcome is a probability. It's a strong probability, but it's not a certainty. So the example I always give is the Alzheimer's gene. You mentioned this earlier. So APOE4 is the Alzheimer's gene. And if you have basically, and this particular gene or particular genetic marker has kind of two negative alleles, are what they're called, but and then you get one from your mom, one from your dad. If you have both basically the negative versions of that, then you're 11 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's than somebody who doesn't have that combination. So that doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's. It just means you're much more likely to get Alzheimer's. So what we're looking at are these high probabilities that the way your body has developed, through environment and through your maturation, that if you have this genetic predisposition, you are very likely going to experience this in terms of how your body processes macronutrients and micronutrients and responds to exercise and things like that. So it's a very, the science is very complex. Taking a cheek swab and running it through these incredible machines to determine your DNA code is it's incredibly complicated. But it's become very, very kind of, I don't want to say mainstream, but it's become very straightforward from a scientific perspective.
Yeah.
You can send your sample off to 3 different labs, and assuming they are high, good quality labs, you're going to get the same result, every time, because they've really perfected it in terms of the testing itself. So, and so what we're doing is constantly, research is being published almost on a daily basis, and so our team is constantly reviewing that research. We're either adding traits as the quality research is published, or we're improving existing traits, and basically using that building body of evidence to improve and enhance our interpretations. I don't know if that answered your question.
It did. It did beautifully. And I wanted to make sure I doubled back on I love that you brought up the Alzheimer's gene, because that created a big stir in the world. I mean, there was like medical pushback, insurance companies were starting to talk through it. And we were getting to this point where we were like, are we looking at a world where if someone does a genetic test, their insurance rates are going to go up? I mean, it started to drive some pretty intense and controversial questions, but you said it so perfectly. People hear you're 11 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's, and they freak out because that sounds like a magnitude. But when you then realize that less than 1% of the population gets Alzheimer's, that means that instead of a 1%, so a 1 in 100 chance, you have an 11 in 100 chance, just for easy numbers. And so that means there's still an 89 in 100 chance that you won't get Alzheimer's. So you have these people that are basically signing their death wish, right? They're saying, I don't want to live with Alzheimer's. I can't do it. And you realize that we started to create a lot of fear out of really just misunderstanding of probability more than anything. And so I appreciated you calling that out and kind of confirming that, but it's so neat to hear that your group is able to use that research and continue to improve basically sort of that probability, right? That alignment, with existing traits as well as develop new traits. I know that last month you guys introduced a couple new ones to the GX Slim, which the GX Slim is the one that we use. The main ones I've always used it for is, it has the fat, carbohydrate, protein metabolism, and then it has sort of the micronutrient tendencies. And then, as you kind of mentioned earlier, it has responses to exercise. How do you respond to cardio and strength training? And what effect does it have on your insulin and your cholesterol and your ability to lose weight? And I know that you guys added caffeine metabolism. And then I think I saw that you added, in addition to what you called like weight loss ability, was also like probability of weight regain, I think was one of them. Was there any others that I missed?
Yeah, we added 6 traits to our existing GX Slim. So overall metabolism was added in addition to caffeine metabolism. So that's a big one. People want to understand that. We added weight regain. We added satiety, which is a really interesting trait as well. What is your genetic predisposition to feeling full, after you've had a decent meal? And then we added sweets preference and bitterness sensitivity as well, because that really kind of feeds. Taste. Yeah, exactly. Taste. And so those traits added, so now I think GX Slim has about 22 unique traits, and again, all geared toward weight loss and achieving a healthy weight. You mentioned the protein, fat, and carbs utilization. One of the most important things we do in the GX Slim program is use those macronutrient utilization outcomes to modify the percentages of protein, fat, and carbs we recommend for that person's diet. So if you are a poor fat utilizer, then we should reduce the amount of fat in your diet. And if you're an enhanced protein utilizer, then we should increase the amount of protein in your diet. So those are really important outcomes that can help people, modify their diet, not only for weight loss, but even after they achieve a healthy weight, they should really be eating in line with their genetic predisposition to maintain healthy weight. Yeah. And then as you mentioned on the exercise side, kind of the 2 key traits there are body fat, body composition response to strength training, and fat loss response to cardio.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to overall health and fitness, everybody should do both, right? Strength and cardio. But when it comes to fat loss, some people, different kinds of exercise affect people in different ways. And so, sometimes common myth is that, okay, if you want to lose weight, you need to do cardio. You got to go ride a bike for an hour a day. You got to run, you got to jog. Well, there are some people who they could do 2 hours of cardio a day and they would be in good cardio, in good physical shape. They would have good cardiovascular, fitness, but they're not losing weight because that's not how their body is designed. They need to be doing more strength training. So what we do with those two traits is we say, okay, based on the outcomes, again, everybody should do both. But if you're genetically predisposed to lose more weight with one or the other, then obviously we recommend, you do more of one or the other. So, those are the kinds of things that people don't really realize. It's not one solution fits all. That's why, like you mentioned, kind of these fad diets, some of these fad diets work great for some and they don't work well for others at all.
Exactly.
And, we've heard this so many times over the years where, two best friends, they say, okay, we're going to go on this diet together. And they literally eat the same thing and they exercise together every day for 6 weeks. One of them loses 10 pounds, the other one gains 2 pounds. And it's because, their body responds differently to diet and exercise. So, you really have to figure out one way or another, whether it's trial or error or through testing, what works best for you. And again, genetic testing gives you a real shortcut to figuring out what works best for you.
Exactly. And that's, the entire concept of case specific nutrition, right? Is that I wanted to help people find their path. And that
I love your name, by the way.
I appreciate that. And, and it's hilarious enough. I actually came up with this name in an introduction to business class when I was in high school. And when I was 15, this was going to be the protein bar company that I made that made protein bars specific to the sport. So like football and basketball and bowling, like everyone would have its own bar. That was my 15-year-old entrepreneur idea. And when I started my practice, case specific nutrition, it just made sense, right? So expectation versus reality. But it's to say that was the pretense of why I started this practice, was recognizing that you work with some people and this works, work with others, this works. And we know there's more to it. And it's why I wanted genetics testing to be such a piece of what we do. But to your point, I laugh because, when somebody finds out their genetic traits, there's such a benefit to that. I will say that more than any other reason, the main reason that I end up doing the genetic test is, like I said, I went to school for 7 years to get pretty good at throwing darts. And in my 7 years as a dietitian, I've made myself a reputation, and our company has a reputation of being pretty good dart throwers. But what's funny is there's always still that level of doubt, And so in particular, you get the people that are in this low fat or low carb craze where they're doing the higher fat diets and it's just not working. And you said it, so-and-so, my one friend did keto, and they lost X pounds and I've gained 6. What's happening? Right. And what's hilarious is typically those people are someone who have a slightly different leptin profile, and their adiponectin, some of their other hormones are not meant for fat burn. They're more meant for carbohydrate. And carbohydrate burners have fast metabolisms if you let them have fast metabolisms. And so these will be these clients where I'll go, hey, I think we need to add some carbohydrates back to your diet. And they're like, there's no way. And instead of having to do months and months of like cognitive behavioral therapy on them, I go, let's get this genetic test. And literally the test comes back and it goes carbohydrates enhanced, fats low, protein normal. And it goes, okay, see, genetically your body prefers carbohydrates. And then they go, genetically? And it's like, yeah, genetically. And so like, I find that once again, when I say it just lets me put it in the bullseye. That's kind of what I mean by it. And so it really is valuable. And then from an exercise perspective, we sit down and, like you said, it's always some combination of resistance and cardio. And that's really just because we need to challenge our bodies in balanced ways so that we can have mobility and stability and bone density. But helping people go, okay, you are someone that should lift a little bit more, and cardio should be more of that, like, that side dish, so to speak. So with that in mind, let's build a program that you're excited about. And it gets people to think about, okay, I'm excited to do this, and I know that has validity to me specifically. There's, again, all the clients that I do this with, they absolutely love the results. And a lot of times I'm not entirely surprised by the results, but it's so reinforcing, and it builds confidence that they're walking on their right path, and it gives me confidence that I am helping them pave that path. So some really, really neat things, and definitely some cool exposures. So you guys have created a business that makes a very big impact.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to make sure we kind of dug into, obviously the overall concept. Can you talk a little bit about where it's going, right? Like, we can hear that just in the last year or two, you've been able to add new traits and solidify and reinforce existing traits. Sort of, where is genetics going in these coming months and years? Like, where do you see, the GX Slim, any sneak peeks into some of the traits you guys are assessing, or the directions that you're going as it pertains to the preventive wellness body?
Well, as you mentioned, we just released, and internally, the release of the new traits with GX Slim. That was our version 4. So we first launched that program in September of 2015. Our medical team is constantly reviewing research, and in general, once a year we will update our algorithms with the latest science. Sometimes that means adding genetic markers to a trait. Sometimes it means, tweaking the algorithm. Sometimes we add traits, like we did with this most recent version. So we're really up to date with GX Slim. I mean, we're obviously always looking at other traits, but, well, I can tell you one trait that we will be adding to GX Slim sooner rather than later is gluten sensitivity. Ooh. So yeah, so gluten sensitivity is obviously very high. High interest in that, and there is a genetic predisposition to it. So we're going to be adding that to GX Slim before too long. But at a higher level, really, and we'll continue, forever, really, to continue to improve, GX Slim and all of our other programs. But at a higher level, really, the world of genetic testing is going to be moving into, or I should say, adding the additional testing of epigenetic testing. And what epigenetic testing is, in layman's terms, so if you think about DNA testing or genetic testing, what we're doing is we're basically saying, what does your DNA say? Your DNA never changes, right? If you took that test the day you're born and take the same test the day you die, it'll be exactly the same. Nothing changes it. But what does change, based on your lifestyle, based on your diet, your exercise routine, your environment, where you live, things like that, are the epigenetic, or it's also called methylation, but it's basically whether genes are turned off or on. And so, and as you can imagine, there are good genes and bad genes. And in general, you want the good genes on and the bad genes off. And so the testing of that, the actual analysis of whether a gene has been turned off or on, is very, very new. Just in the last few years has the ability to test that come around. And there are some good tests for that now. And in the future, what we want to be able to do is to say, okay, take your genetic test so we know what your baseline is. And then we'll do our first epigenetic test, which tells us, okay, which of these genes related to our specific areas, again, to diet, lifestyle, exercise, which are turned off and which are turned on. And then we'll make recommendations based on, those outcomes. And then we'll retest in 9 or 12 months and see, okay, were we able to flip some of those good genes on and flip some of those bad genes off? And that's really the future of genetic testing. It's really in its infancy right now. I don't see us having a product in the market for at least probably 18 months to 2 years, just because
it's actually sooner than I thought, to be honest. So that's exciting.
Yeah, well, That's aggressive. I'm hopeful. That's my optimistic.
Well, that's your job. I mean, COO, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, that's my optimistic estimate. So I'm sticking to it. But, one of our partners in the testing space, the manufacturer actually creates the genetic testing equipment and supplies. One of their executives told me they are seeing more new research being performed on epigenetic testing than in traditional genetic testing. So that's a big statement.
That's huge. Absolutely.
There's a ton of research being done.
But to your point, I mean, the applications are, when we're starting to see this world where we have all these autoimmune disorders, and we have, obviously we're diagnosing and catching cancers, but we have all these new types of cancers developing. We know that there's an environmental exposure that's triggering genetic expression and causing these things. But and so you start to realize these are massive health problems that are getting tackled now. I know actually it was in my residency, I did one of my research projects on vitamin D and multiple sclerosis. And there was a lot of data to show that vitamin D deficiency is what turned on the expression for MS. And so somebody was born with that gene to have MS, but it would stay dormant and turned off. And if their vitamin D levels went low, which in Pittsburgh, they go low all the time, right? That gene would turn on and MS would start expressing. And they had some really promising studies where they would mega dose vitamin D. I mean, a normal person takes 2,000 to 5,000 IU a day. They were giving 16,000 IU a day, and it would literally stop the acute and the remitting MS forms dead in their tracks. And any damage that was done, but they would stop progressive damage. And so that's just one example of the epigenetic clues that I think are leading to this phenomenal research you're getting. So that was fantastic. I love it. I want to make sure I let people digest this. So we're going to go ahead and pause today. I might try and bring you back if you'd be okay with in the future to talk about the genetic tests a bit more. But in the meantime, I wanted to let everybody know that if you are interested in a genetic test, please reach out to us. We perform the Genetic Direction tests at Case Specific Nutrition. You can also go to geneticdirection.com and you can work through and see their stuff and look at the different things they have. They have their research up there. They're very transparent and informative. It is a great group to work with. It's been a pleasure to work with you guys. And I'm always excited when I get an email announcing new research and new things. So thanks again for putting together such a great vision and creating such a phenomenal product.
Absolutely. Thank you for being a partner.
Oh, absolutely. And to everybody listening, thank you again for tuning into the CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast. We will be back next week with another CSN3M podcast. Until then, be well and keep learning about your path.